When I got
Hey, can you, me, and Naoma stay after the meeting and talk about Clear Acre?
Yep.
Okay. I think that'd be good to loop her in on this.
agreed.
Okay. All right. Back to mute and no camera.
I want to see a motorcycle.
You know what? They redid my computer.
Uh-huh.
I don't have those photos anymore.
Yeah, probably somebody doesn't like motorcycles.
Must be those IT guys, you know?
Yeah.
The
Well.
nerdy.
Morning, Christina.
Oh, really? Oh, I didn't know that.
Okay, and so she'll unmute me then?
I can hear you now, Christina.
All right, thanks. Okay, bye.
And that guy Alex.
Think we're waiting for the chair. Once she gets on and we hit the allotted time, she'll start the meeting. Christina, did you get your muting problem fixed?
I did.
Okay.
I'm all ready to start talking and do this presentation when we're ready.
Okay, excellent.
Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
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 Bill or Denise, will you just let me know when we've got all of our members that are anticipated to be here? Let me know when they're on.
I believe I'm just looking around now. I believe we've got everybody who's going to be here. I don't believe Bob is in town.
Okay.
So you're all here.
Okay.
Chairman,
And Denise, we're ready. You got everything going, recording, and
I can't hear you, Neema. Let me see. Hang on. Okay.
you're good?
We're all here.
Yep.
Fantastic. Welcome, everybody.
Denise, we're
Welcome.
ready. You got everything going, recording and.
Yep. I'm going to record.
Let me see.
Now it's,
Ooh,
sorry, I'm getting echo on my computer.
yeah, we've got a pretty significant delay.
All here. Okay, fantastic.
See, record.
Welcome, everybody. We're ready. You got everything going, recording and. Let me see.
Sorry.
Okay, well, we'll begin. And then Denise, just so you know, on your end, you have a significant delay that feeds back to us.
Welcome,
So
everybody. We're ready.
you'll need to mute your end as soon as we get going here, which might mitigate the problem. Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the January 14th meeting of a special meeting of the RTC board. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Denise. You may need to mute.
1 second. Okay. You ready for a roll call?
Yes, let's go with the roll call. Thank you.
Okay. Neoma Jordan,
Here.
Ed Lawson, Von Hartung.
Here.
Oscar Delgado.
Here.
Christina Swallow.
Here.
Bill Thomas,
Here.
Adam Spear,
Here.
And Bob Lucy is not in attendance. Thank you. We have a quorum.
Thank you very much, Denise. I am going to turn it over to Bill Thomas at this time for the procedures of this meeting. This is a bit different than we normally do. So at this time, Bill, I'll turn it over to you to facilitate.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I do think the way we've got the agenda set up, we have the Pledge of Allegiance on. So we're gonna do that. And move into the meeting. And Denise, as long as you have your mic open, it records back. And that's going to be the challenge on your end. Denise.
I'm having a hard time hearing. Sorry, guys.
You need to mute yourself.
Denise, can you hear me?
Yes, but because I'm doing this live stream on YouTube, it's echoing back on my computer.
Yes, you'll just have to mute. So we're going to go right to the Pledge of Allegiance and then we'll turn it over to Bill Thomas. At this time, I would ask for Brian Stewart. Would you mind leading us in the pledge?
We'll use Commissioner Hartung's flag, or Neoma as one too. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So Denise, can you turn yours off? Yourself.
No, Amber's going to go down and talk to Denise and tell her about the problem.
What's it doing?
You're echoing back, so you need to mute yours. Your end, Denise.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, Bill, all yours.
All right. Thank you, everybody. And apologize for the technical difficulties. This is the first all Zoom that we've done. And just sharing with the board, we're also going to do the same thing on our workshop next Friday, which hopefully will go a little bit more smoothly. Thank you for participating today. We've set aside an hour for this presentation. And Christina is going to actually be given the presentation. I wanted to share with all of you maybe a little background from my end so you understand what the ask is and why we're here. I'm sure Christina will go through the agency, the Sustainable Funding Advisory Working Group, and that's what this presentation is about. I did want to share with you that the MPOs by legislation are members. So I represent our county and our metropolitan planning organization in this group. I did make a presentation along with Christina and the consultant that NDOT has hired to well, I don't know, Christina, if you were on the call, but we did make the same presentation to all of your public works directors. So we at RTC have made a conscious effort that all of your technical staffs for each of the 3 jurisdictions are aware of what's going on. Christina will get into the details, but from our end, this is really an informational item. There is no action that's asked of you, so there's no vote that's going to be had. I will work with Christina in terms of managing the meeting, but we will also have opportunities if it doesn't feel like after this meeting you've expressed fully what you want to say. I am the representative for Washoe County, like I said, so I'm more than happy to take forward concerns or questions if they don't come up today or you don't feel fully satisfied that they got on the table. There's still further opportunities going forward. So I had talked to Neoma about process here, and I think what would be best, unless Christina has already structured something else, is that when she's done and she's asking for any comments or thoughts, that maybe we have 3 minutes each, just so we can stay within our 1 hour, which all of you were very gracious to give us this time, but I do want to be conscious of the fact that this is a special effort and we had to take time out of your busy days to fit this in. Not that you don't mind doing it, but it does make it a little tight. So I will shut up and hand it over to Christina.
1 minute, Madam Chair. We do have public commenters here. Now that my sound is fixed.
Thank you very much. We will go back to public comment at this time, and then we will go to Director Swallow for her presentation. Thank you, Denise.
We have Paco LaToy up first. Should be showing you.
No, I see her.
Let me see. Sorry. Sorry, guys. Why is it not showing you?
Can they,
Come and
can
talk
you
at my
guys hear
computer.
me?
Let me mute this. You come and talk at my computer.
Yes, we can hear you, Paco.
Denise, we could see and hear him.
I'm gonna have him get my computer. 3 minutes.
Oh, mine's not that long. Okay. Good morning. I am Dr. Paco Luchoy, a title I really don't use very often. Most people just call me Paco. I am chairman of the City of Reno Senior Citizen Advisory Committee and a writer on RTC Ride. I want to thank the RTC WASHO for listening to the concerns of seniors following the announcement of the change of all the fixed routes moving to a Sunday-only schedule. The announcement created issues for seniors who ride the bus during midday, as 3 routes, 2 of which serve medical facilities, had a gap in service. A conversation was started on December the 30th. There was reaction from the public also. RTC took a very proactive stance, listening to what riders and the community were saying. This resulted in the 3 routes with gaps on service. Route 4, which serves St. Mary's in Northern Nevada Hopes, Route 13, which serves the VA facility, and Route 18. Service was also enhanced on the Virginia Rapid Line, which was planned for 30 minutes. It's now every 15. These changes are appreciated, and RTC deserves a big thank you for listening and hearing the concerns from its riders and the public. Communication is always the key when issues arise, and RTC did that. Listened and instituted change. Thank you to Bill Thomas, his staff, Jim, Mark, Michael, Lauren, and Susie, and the RTC chair, Neoma Jordan, for opening up the lines of communication. There's still one issue on the horizon, the new Northern Nevada Medical Center located at Longley and R Airway. The hospital has been planned for nearly 10 years and was scheduled to actually open 3 years ago, but as we all know, things get delayed. It will finally open at the end of March. It lacks a fixed route near it. It would be appreciated if RTC can look into the solution so that hospital staff, patients can easily reach this facility. This facility will be dealing with cardiac, with women's health, and several other things. So it will be necessary to try to figure out transportation to that area. In a few years, they will also be adding a medical office building to that same location. Again, thank you, RTC, for listening to the concerns of seniors and the community to resolve the issue. The move was done, and again, to provide use with the public with transportation that is constant, on time, and reliable. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Paco. You're a great advocate for seniors. And thank you to the RTC staff. You really were very, very responsive, very quickly. And I'm glad to see routes are already increasing. I'm going to knock on some wood because I know Omicron and staffing could change that at any moment. So, but thank you to everybody, Mark, and everybody that's been involved. Really was a great response. And to Paco, you're a great champion for seniors. So thank you. Madam Clerk.
Next up, we have Betty Hansen, or Betty Manson, I'm sorry. Betty?
Thank you for having me. I just came as a thank you for all the senior citizens in my community, the 89512 zip code area, who use the buses extensively. And we were very concerned, and it was wonderful to see the response that RTC gave to everybody. So I just wanted to say thank you, and we heard you. We appreciate you. Thank you.
Very sweet. Thank you for coming down to share your kind words. Thank you. Madam Clerk.
Next up, we have Mac Rossi.
Good morning. My name is Mac Rossi. I'm also a member of the Senior Advisory Board, and we're here to always complain, but we thought we'd take the time to come back and thank you too for your evaluation and rescheduling some of the routes. Thank you again.
Thanks, Mac.
We have one more, Chris Fuqua.
Morning, Chris.
Sorry, trying to destroy the computer over here. Good morning. I'm not as prepared as I'd like to be today. This meeting came to a surprise to us. I'm not sure if it was rescheduled to today's date or not. But just want to say, obviously, with everything going on in the community, I understand Keolis is looking to do a lot of hiring. I've been hearing a lot of advertisements on that. And it sounds like things are moving a good direction with that way. The Teamsters believe that the deal that we got done to get the contract done was definitely good to get the contract done, but more money needs to be put in the system to allow to attract the quality people that we need, to attract the people that would normally not necessarily be looking at to becoming a driver for the RTC and Keolis. So I think there needs to be more done in that regards. And also, we also need to be looking at the paratransit contract that's coming up. If you look at that contract, it's ridiculously low on wages, very low on wages. You can go to any fast food place and start off more working at fast food than you would at our MTM contract. And that's something that the RTC needs to look at, to where we need to put pressure. We need to let them know that the RTC is standing behind their contractors and getting these wages up. Obviously, we do not want to have what happened the last go around with Keolis having 3 strikes. No, that didn't help anybody. And it is our belief the RTC could have done more to have prevented the strikes and to end the strikes a lot sooner. So I'm putting it on you guys, letting you guys know that contract is coming up. And please, let's get some money put into the pockets of those members, those employees that are driving day in, day out, that have been since this pandemic started. And we need more operators out there, and we need to attract new drivers, new operators, new mechanics to come into these places and make the system up. Because you know as well as I do, if we don't have the money in the system, we're not going to get the ridership up. And it's very difficult to get the public's trust if those buses aren't running on time, if the ADA people members that put in a call in to have an appointment set, they're an hour, 2 hours behind. These things should not be happening. And we need to do what we can as a community to support that and get that going, and to put money into those systems to attract new people and retain the people that are already there.
Time's up anyway.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris. Madam Clerk.
That's all the public comment we have.
All right, thank you very much. Over to you, Mr. Thomas, who I think had already turned it over to Mrs. Swallow. Good morning, Christina.
Good morning. And like Bill said, I just wanted to thank you for taking the time and creating the special meeting so we could give you an update on the advisory working group. I am going to share my screen, and so I can do a PowerPoint. And I know it was emailed out in advance, but just so that you also have it. Move you guys over there. So you've been hearing me advisory working group for months. We talked about it all of the legislative session 2013, something that we were advocating, or 2021, something we were advocating for, and you've been hearing about it on a monthly basis since we've actually been able to stand it up. But we wanted to go a little bit deeper in the presentation. We're actually doing a broad statewide engagement, and we're doing these presentations throughout the state with lots of different parties and stakeholders because we want everyone to know what we're doing, give them, again, just the awareness of opportunities for participation and feedback as we continue in this effort through the end of this year when our report is due to the Nevada legislature. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the why. What's the situation? You've heard me talk about it before. I'll try not to dwell on it. We'll talk about who the study is, what the study is, and who's part of it, who the advisory working group is. And then we'll talk about how we're doing our work, the guiding principles, why we have those, and the next steps. So as a little bit of background, and something that I'm sure you're all familiar with, Nevada is growing. Our construction costs are also growing and have been, and are not just growing in this last year, but have been since the last time we did a real look at the statewide funding of our transportation system. And while our population is growing and our construction costs are growing, the other thing that's also growing, you've heard me talk about this, is vehicles miles traveled. Our communities continue to get geographically larger, and when they do that, the miles traveled by everyone in our community end up being longer. So vehicles mile travel is actually outpacing population growth. Gas tax remains the largest single source of transportation funding in the state. It is not the sole source, but it is the largest. And on a statewide basis, our state gas taxes and special fuels comprise 42% of our state funding. You may remember that our federal funding is it's about 40% of our total funding is our federal funding, and that is also largely gas taxes. 34% of our state funding are taxes on vehicles and drivers. These are things like registration fees and driver's license fees. And then there's another 24% that is other types of fees, some DMV, public safety revenue, other sorts of taxes and fees. Also, we know that the counties are reliant on gas tax revenue, with 39% of the county transportation funding sources coming from mandatory and optional county taxes, some fuel revenue indexing in Clark and Washoe. And then there's also, the counties also do benefit from some other taxes on vehicles and drivers. There's some county taxes on licenses and fees on motor vehicles. Primarily, though, this is the county portion of the government service tax. And then again, there's some other taxes and fees that are collected by the counties to help support the county transportation systems. As we've seen, I mentioned it briefly at the beginning, transportation revenue is simply not keeping pace with the cost to maintain the system, operate the system, and as our communities grow the system. You can see here just a quick snapshot of how vehicle mile travel, so those miles that are traveled by everybody every single day, how that is actually outpacing the fuel increases. And this is largely because of the erosion in the gas tax impact. Over time, yes, EVs are going to be a significant impact. Today, they're not a significant part of the fleet, so that they're not the primary cause of the erosion of the gas tax. It really is the increased fuel efficiency that we're seeing in everyday cars and the increased adoption of hybrids and other sorts of vehicles. So when your vehicle in the 90s might have had a fuel efficiency of 15 to 20 miles per gallon, as we all know, a lot of just the regular sedans out on the road today have fuel efficiencies easily 25 to 30 miles a gallon, if not even better than that if it's a hybrid. And so what we're seeing is the gas tax that we're collecting on a per gallon basis just isn't going as far because it's eroded from just shy of 1.3 cents per mile to down closer to just over a cent per mile. So that also has an impact. And before I move on to the ins and outs of the study, you've heard me say this before. Overall, at NDOT, we're facing an annual shortfall of over $500 million. So looking at that, recognizing that fuel efficiency is going to continue to improve, recognizing that adoption of EVs is going to continue to increase, the legislature said it's time for us to really look at how do we fund the transportation system to ensure everybody can get to where they want to go when they want to go there reliably and safely. And so out of SCR3, which was during the 2019 session, the legislature was already thinking about this in 2019. They established a committee. We had some really robust conversations and did some early research into what the opportunities might be around funding of the transportation system. Out of that effort, in the 2021 session, AB 413 was passed, and that directs us at NDOT to convene an advisory working group to really study the long-term transportation funding needs and recommend some funding options. Now that those options, as we're doing this work, we need to really be thinking about social equity, user equity. So is everybody paying what they should based on their use of the system? And then how does that payment plan, how does that impact different demographics of our community? Do we have issues with the social equity piece while we're working on the user equity? We're also really looking at trying to make sure we're thinking about the climate goals as we work through all of this. So any funding options that we're looking at, we're trying to see, is that going to impact in a positive or negative way our ability in the transportation space to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from the largest contributor in the state, which is transportation. And then we've been tasked with looking at trying to figure out, what are the roles that land use planning have and smart growth have in this space. So it's a big challenge we have before us. We have a great team that's working on it. This slide represents the guiding document that the advisory working group adopted. We tried to take the legislative language and give us just kind of a one sentence framework so that we could all be on the same page as what are we looking at here. And so that's that second paragraph on the page that you're looking at, consistent with AB 413. That's the bill. And then those parts that are blue on this are really that's what we took out. That's specific bill language. We really need to be looking at multimodal transportation funding for all users. So this isn't car driven. It definitely, we know that cars are the primary user, but we need to take into account that there are a lot of other users out there, and how do we make sure that the system works for everyone? We need that social and user equity I mentioned earlier, greenhouse gas emissions, land use, smart growth. And the bill also directed us to look at two specific alternatives in addition. So at least these two, and that was the Utah road user charge model that Utah has already put into place and is working with right now in the state. There's a lot of other pilot models that have been going on in that road user charge space, but Utah has actually implemented legislatively that effort. And then also the NRDC, the National Resource Defense Council, had a recommendation that we looked at during the SCR3 effort, and we also were tasked with looking at and including in our analysis as we work on this AB 413 effort. So who is this advisory working group? The advisory working group consists of 29 members. It's broad, it's diverse, it includes, as Bill mentioned, all 4 of the MPOs are members, and Bill is a great representative of the Washoe MPO. He's participating, he's giving us a lot of good input and feedback, which is great. We also have environmental agencies and organizations, and some of those are nonprofit and some of those are state organizations. For instance, the Governor's Office of Energy and the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources are on the committee. We have clean energy representation. Actually, NV Energy is one of our representatives, tax policy expertise. We have NACO, League of Cities, and county representation on the committee. And then we have legislative representation, Assemblywoman Danielle Monroe Moreno and Senator Dallas Harris. Labor is involved, the local chambers, and Silver is a regular participant, the Nevada Resort Association. And so this is all intended because if we are going to look at any sort of revenue package, we know that we have to have broad input. So we know where the challenges may be. We know what the opportunities may be. We'll have broad support. So we're really looking at how do we get all of those voices at the table so we can hear and understand the challenges associated that they face with the transportation system and make sure we develop a package that works for the state. I think I started talking to you all about this back in perhaps December of 2020, but for sure throughout the spring of 2021, while we were working on the legislative effort, we were also working on making sure we were ready to go in the case, which we were hoping would happen, that it got approved. And so our first meeting during June and July, we were really working on getting that advisory group staffed. Who are the people, who are those particular representatives? Because we knew we couldn't have someone from every city and every county. So who were the right people? We did that in June and July. In August, we had a sort of introductory meeting. And since then, we've been meeting almost monthly. You can see there was a skip in October, there was a skip in December, and during those skip months, our consulting team would go back and they take the feedback that they heard from the advisory working group, develop some additional information, and it gave them a chance to do maybe some deeper dives before we would have our next meeting. Our most recent meeting was this past Monday, where we did some alternative analyses, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that here in a bit, so I'm not going to dwell on this slide. All right. Early on, our consulting team, they've done this before. This is not their first rodeo in Nevada. So they recommended that if we were going to be looking at funding alternatives, we really needed to be aware of how we were going to measure those, because there are so many different opportunities and challenges with some. Some might actually be really fantastic revenue generators, but they might really fail when it comes into the user and social equity or the climate efforts. On the other hand, something that does really well on climate might not do as well with generating the revenue. So how do we weigh those, and what's most important, user equity or social equity? How do we weigh those? So they helped the advisory working group navigate to develop some funding principles around the language within the bill. And I should note the AWG crafted these and they adopted these in November. And you can see those on the screen. So we have one that's around financial sustainability, and that is making sure that whatever revenue we generate, it is going to be able to cover us for the long haul. And I'm going to use an example on this. So right now, we know the fuel tax is not particularly sustainable as cars become more fuel efficient and EV adoption increases. So the fuel tax doesn't rank very well on the sustainability piece. But it does right now rank okay on sufficiency, because if we adjust it, it can certainly meet our needs today. So financial sustainability, sufficiency, user equity and social equity, how does it impact? Flexibility. That was something, as we talk about multimodal needs, we were really talking about, is the revenue that we're generating flexible? We all know right now the fuel tax and any tax on a vehicle or driver must be directly linked to maintenance and development of the roadway system. So we can't flex that to, for instance, transit operations. So how flexible is the funding, and how important is that? Greenhouse gas emissions, and then transparency and efficiency and ease of compliance. This one actually ended up getting broken out into two. How transparent is it? Does the user who's paying it, do they know what they're paying? Do they understand what they're paying, where it's going? And then ease of compliance is how much is it going to cost us to deliver, to roll this out, to collect that revenue? Some things are more costly to collect. Some things are going to have larger barriers in terms of setting up administrative efforts to do that. So looking at those two. We looked at earlier this week on Tuesday, we looked at 25 different types of revenue mechanisms. They're grouped on the slide by, fuel taxes, things that are, fuel tax. What we pay today, that excise tax, that per gallon excise tax, and then also perhaps the fuel revenue indexing that is happening in Clark and Washoe, but there are a couple others in that space. We looked at changes in vehicle fees. We already have a GST. You could increase that, but you could do different. And there's some add a couple of different other things. Some usage-based fees, which are different. And I've mentioned that Utah has a model in place right now. Some other states, actually a good number, I think it's 15 or 20 other states are actually piloting and looking at this. And the federal government is piloting and looking at ways to move to perhaps a road usage-based fee system moving forward. Some indirect funds like a tax on your battery, or particularly on the EV batteries, or a tax on tires. And then there's a random assortment of others that we looked at. And a lot of these are based on things that we've seen or that our consulting team has seen in other states that other states are doing or have suggested doing. Parcel delivery fees, adding something for every parcel. Looking at street utility fee. A lot of local agencies are looking at doing this. A payroll tax. Oregon has a payroll tax to help support transit operations across the state, looking at it as a sort of a park, police, fire. It's a general service that everybody benefits from, even if everybody doesn't use it. So everybody should contribute a payroll tax. So we looked at lots of different things. And some states support transit funding through urban transit funding, through general fund allocation. So we looked at all of these, and I don't have a slide that shows you the pros and cons. They actually did. It's a bit of an eye chart, a red, yellow, green analysis of all of these across all of those guiding principles to really show, some do really well on some categories, some do, and those same that do well on some categories really fail on others. So really looking at all 25 of those. And then on Tuesday, so January, that's alternatives analysis, we were looking at trying to figure out, are any of those non-starters, and just knocking them out and trying to shortlist. And while Bill will attest, we didn't shortlist very well. I think we knocked off only the payroll tax. Everything else was still in play because there's benefits to thinking about these. And I'm gonna go back here and I'm gonna say, like, the street utility fee. That might be something that maybe the state doesn't want to implement, but it might be a good idea for locals. So there was a lot more in here. And so our consulting team is out there. We had some really robust conversation about pros and cons to each of them. Between now and March, another one of those skip months, our consulting team is really going to be looking at all of the remaining, so now it's 24 that are remaining options, and trying to create some packages. After the conversation, I think even back in October, we realized, although we didn't have a meeting in October, so November, I think in November, we quickly realized that whatever we come forward with as recommendations, it's likely going to be a package. No one of those 24 different funding mechanisms checks all of the boxes and is perfect. There isn't a single one. And if there was, I think we would have already been able to do it. And so we're really looking at likely some sort of a package that includes some that maybe provide help address our funding needs right now, and others that might help address our funding needs tomorrow. Some that might be really good on time in terms of climate, but others that might be better on social and user equity. So really like a suite of packages, a package of funding sources. Our team is looking at combining and mixing and matching and combining to figure out what might make most sense to help us meet our funding needs on a long-term basis. March meeting, our meetings so far to date have been held in Carson and in Vegas and streamed between the two. Our March and April meetings are going to be in person, the entire AWG in the same room, so that we can really have a streamlined, robust conversation about what's in front of us, with the hope that in April, we'll be able to really have our recommendations pretty fine-tuned, with June as our final meeting. All of this, we were tasked with doing this in the biennium, with a report due to the legislature by the end of 2022, end of this year. But we recognize if we don't have recommendations here by early summer, we may miss the boat in terms of being able to really have a chance at the legislature in 2023. All of the build up deadlines are over the summer, and we want to make sure the legislators are aware of what we're thinking, aware of what the needs are and what options may be before them, so that we can move forward in the 2023 legislative session. And for more information, you can email us, you can go to our website. And I should note that I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can see all of you. I should note that this is every meeting is a public meeting, so we are accepting public comment. You can certainly email us outside of those meetings. We're doing this because we want to make sure that we're hearing from the local agencies and all of the stakeholders. So we'll be presenting also to the local chambers, all of those groups. We're asking our advisory groups to provide an introduction so we can talk to them and we can hear feedback. So like I said, we want broad feedback. That's why we have 29 advisory working group members. We picked those 29 because they represent a much broader stakeholder group, and we're hoping they're going to help us engage and get feedback. And that concludes my report.
Thank you very much. Bill, back to you.
Thank you. So I think just to capture, and Christina, thank you so much. That was very well done. This is it's a very complex process on very complex issues. And at the end of the day, I think, like Christina said, it's going to be a mixture of funding sources that are going to be recommended. But I do think this opportunity might be valuable for maybe just briefly. You know, we're not going to answer anything. Christina can't give you a thumbs up, thumbs down where we're going with it, but I do think there's value when we do this process because she and her team are going to be going across the state talking to other bodies. This is a good opportunity for the four of you to maybe just highlight, your concerns, your interests, just so as we move forward and we come up with this, we understand that we're being sensitive to everybody. Because it's not going to be easy, but I'm hoping, Christina, and with your team, we're going to come up with the best menu and formula we can, but realizing that's going to be give and take amongst a lot of players.
Well, and I should note that what we do is a recommendation. Ultimately, the legislature will have to make the decision, but we're trying to make that decision and that process as easy for them as possible. I also failed to mention, I have a couple team members internal. So I have Sandra Rosenberg on here. She's a key member of our team on this, but I also have our consulting team is on here as well. So they're taking notes. If I need help to answering questions, I might turn to them. Cami Dempsey is part of the comms team, and Jeff Doyle is part of the team that's done these efforts in the past. So.
And before we get into comments from the board, I do want to highlight the fact that NDOT is basically the messenger and the facilitator. At the end of the day, this is a legislative direction. So while I appreciate personally Christina and her team leading this, it's really not theirs. They're managing it, but they don't get the final say.
Mayor Lawson.
So here's my main concern, Christina, is this thing gets evaluated, and as we've seen at the legislature, everything gets filtered through the eye of the Las Vegas, Clark County lens. And Washoe County, we're lumped in with that group, and we actually end up with less money because of what this program, however it is. And I just looked up the Utah road users charge, pretty ingenious actually, and it wasn't near what I thought it would be as far as money wise, but I think it's a great idea. But my concern is we lose what we have currently to try and solve a problem that may not necessarily be a Washoe County problem.
I appreciate you mentioning that because Washoe County has the fuel revenue indexing and has been able to really leverage that as a funding source. Unfortunately, though, and I should express appreciation because it's a little different than when they did it in the county, in that it all goes to Washoe County. But I should note that periodically you contribute to make sure that our state roads are able to advance, and so that is a good partnership. This is meant to really look at the state funding needs. It's not meant to impact negatively the locals. And in some cases, those recommendations, I think I mentioned one that were like, this might be something that we recommend as enabling language if it doesn't already exist, to give more options to the local agencies, be it an MPO, a county, or a city. So we may have some of those, but ultimately we're looking to try to be additive to the state fund. And so grow the pie so that everybody gets more and that there's more resources to address all of those challenges that we talk about on a monthly basis in Washoe County.
And while I trust you at your word, you know what happens when session comes around. Things go out the window. Common sense seems to leave the building at various times during the session. So that's my main concern, is we're putting this in the hands of a majority of people that live in one county.
Unfortunately, I can't raise revenue without them. So
I get it. That's my main concern.
I hear you.
Thank you, Member Lawson. Member Hartung.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the presentation, Ms. Swallow. What I don't see, but I think it's sort of hidden in the language under the user-based fees, the direct at a distance-based charge for light-duty vehicles. Is that a VMT tax? Is that what the suggestion is there?
Well, let me go back.
That's on slide 16, by the way. I'm sorry. I apologize.
So you're looking at a distance based for light duty. Yeah, yes. So that would be right now, all we do is we pay on a per gallon basis, which is
Right.
somewhat linked to our usage, this would actually be a per mile fee. So it might be a penny, it might be 3 pennies for
Right.
every mile you drive. And there's some administrative challenges to that, but Utah has actually really worked on figuring out how to deliver that in a way that is equitable and addresses a lot of the concerns that have been barriers in the past.
Okay, so couple of things. One, as an ICE user, internal combustion engine user, right? I don't have an EV. I would be paying a tax twice versus somebody who has an EV who would only be paying that tax once. So that's disproportionate in my opinion. So because I have to pay a fuel tax and then I would have to pay a distance tax, potentially a VMT tax. So I'm very concerned with, taxing people twice. And while I understand the incentives, it's going to take years to flush out all of the ICE vehicles in the nation, in the world, years. Certainly not within my lifetime. So I concern myself with that. And if we do go to a VMT type of a tax, have you guys thought about spreading it out over a year? So let's say my vehicle registration goes from $500 a year to $2,000. Or whatever. My vehicle registration goes from $200 a year to $2,000, and we say we get rid of the fuel taxes, and this is the way that we do this based on VMTs. Potentially, it could be a disproportionate tax to lower income people because they can't afford to shell out $2,000 in one pop, and it hurts even the normal person to say, okay, here comes my vehicle registration bill, and it hurts. Where when I go and fill up my car, I don't notice it, Christina. You know what I mean? Because I pay it, a couple of bucks at a time. So did you look at did the study group look at the timing of those things to say, okay, it's going to cost me $2,000 to register my car over the year. Here's your monthly fee from DMV to, and while I understand that all the money wouldn't be coming in at once, it at least doesn't become disproportionate.
I'm so glad that you brought up that particular model. We recognize that there are some challenges with that model and its viability today. What Utah has actually done is they've provided it as a model for those vehicles who are already paying less. So the EVs, it wasn't additive onto the internal combustion engines. It's for the EVs, and they've been tasked with rolling it out for everyone. So they're working on that, but they're looking at those balance points and how do you make sure that it's not, to your point, a double tax. So it's like and I think everybody envisions that as sort of I'm trying to do my hands, a phase in and a phase out, right? So as the gas tax goes down, the road user charge goes up. So like, if we were to implement that, there's a lot that would have to go in, we'd have to put in place. It wouldn't be like tomorrow. So if the legislature was to say in 2023, we're going to raise the gas tax, we could raise the gas tax on whatever schedule they wanted, but pretty much immediately, right? The road user charge would require us to stand up. And so already there would be some delay in delivering. And so that's the long-term financial sustainability piece. It wouldn't be a tomorrow. It would be, what do we do? Who does it apply to first? How do we implement it? Is it going to be, there's some versions where it's a chip. And so it reads and it talks to the gas pumps. There could be something very seamless like that. And we don't collect our gas tax on an annual basis anyway, Vaughn, to your point, like we get it over time. It could be something like that. It could be a registration fee that's on a monthly basis. There would need to be more work in standing that up, but it likely and it very well could be part of a package, recognizing that we need to address the long-term degradation of fuel tax. So that might be part of the package, but we would recognize that there would still be work to be done.
No, and I appreciate that. Thank you so much because right now, and I don't have a very fuel efficient vehicle. You guys love me. My car will pass anything on a road except the gas station. And so I'm what the system was based on. But EVs, so then the other thing is I don't know how you would add a tax on to EV electricity consumed. That's an interesting one, and I'd like to hear more about it. I don't want to take up any more time, but I would also like, Madam Chair, at some point for the board and maybe the community to better understand the Utah model and some of the other models that are going on around the nation. I would love to see what other states have done to try to solve this problem. And so maybe in the coming months, we can see a presentation and try to send the legislature some feedback just based on what we've learned and what we know our own communities look like. I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Member Hartung. Member Delgado? You good? Okay. My comments are kind of in line with what we've heard. I do have some questions. Maybe these are for Adam Spear. So I would have to believe that any modifications as it relates to legislative platform direction that would come from this body would go through its normal process closer to the legislative cycle. Is that correct?
I think that's how we've normally done it in the past. But
Okay.
I don't think that there's any prohibition on us starting on that as soon as this board wanted to.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that we weren't going to mitigate or modify that process by this process. I just want to make sure, because the world changes so quickly that we know as the legislature gets closer, because there's things at play here we may not know federally, what's happening with the gas tax, what sort of suggestions and modifications do they have as it relates to electric vehicles, where is technology, when this might be implemented with a point of charge fee. I don't know if that gets there. I would imagine at some point technology may get to that point where you pull up, whether it's a gas pump or an electric charging station, and you pay at the pump for the usage in which you consume. That doesn't modify the gap for gas fuel efficient vehicles, which I know that's another discussion. And then Adam, any sort of modifications and changes to Mayor Lawson's point, I get twitchy when the legislature starts to tinker with things that were voted on by the public, meaning Washoe County voted on the fuel tax in which we currently index and use right now. So any modification of that portion of the program, just clarify for me, that would have to go back to a vote of the people, or does the legislature have the ability to modify that?
Well, there are a number of different laws that apply when you're talking about fuel tax. There's constitutional provisions, there are statutory provisions, there are county ordinances. There are also outstanding bonds that Washoe County has issued, which limit the ability to change fuel tax legislatively. And so all of those issues have to be worked through. So with that said, it would be a complicated process, and there would be a number of limitations on changes that could be made. Okay.
I would feel, and again, this is not legal, this is just a feeling, that any modifications to a voted on mandate sort of thing would have to go back through that process to repeal or modify. But that's, maybe we need to do a little more digging on that. My feelings are thank you to the group that is jumping into this very complicated and multi-pronged process. Everybody, I think, knows that you have to start somewhere. And, my 2 cents is that you don't mess with what's in place in Washoe County that the voters voted on. I think whatever, like you said, whatever modifications come, they're a plus, not a subtraction from what we already realize in that regard. And that in the event there is a modification, that it be, considered for spreading out across a variety of different, models and payers, I guess, for lack of a better term, because I like Member Hartung. It concerns me if someone gets a whopping DMV registration fee all at one time, because that's a hard one to swing for most people on an annual basis anyway. So that's my 3 cents, I guess that was. So.
Well,
anybody? Oh, go ahead. Sorry. Christina?
I was just going to say, I appreciate all of your input and your thoughts. And like I said, the consulting team is listening. I wasn't taking as many notes as I normally do because I know that they're listening and taking that into account, but I heard you. And we're happy to have further conversations. The intent of this is to really meet those needs. As we have our conversations on a monthly basis, and you're like, why aren't you doing? Why can't you do? We need more. You're right. On the statewide basis, we need more. And that's what this is really working to address. And we're hopeful that at the end of this, come June, we'll have some recommendations that everybody is able to support. And then we can work together to figure out what that support looks like on an agency basis. But the goal of this is to make sure that there are more resources to deliver the transportation system that Nevadans need and deserve.
Yeah, and I appreciate all the work that you've put in. And you'll continue to, I'm guessing at our monthly meetings, you'll just give a quick update when you give your update on what's happening with this tremendous working group. And Bill, of course, is our great representative on that. So that correct?
Yep, I'll do it on a monthly basis.
Fantastic. All right, Director Thomas, thank you, Director Swallow. Director Thomas, do we have anything else you need from us here today?
No more business today. And I want to jump on what Christina said. Really thankful for all of you taking the time and putting this, your thoughts and guidance out there, because it'll be helpful in getting a package, hopefully, that everybody will support when it gets to the legislature. Maybe it's Pollyannic to think that way, but I think that's the goal. I think that's the way we pull it off, is everybody shows up down there and says, we want this. It's probably less likely to be fiddled with, in my opinion, if everybody's in sync, which is a big, tall order for Christina and her team to provide. But thank you again, everybody.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, everybody. If nothing else, Denise, do we have any closing public comment?
We do not.
Okay, if there's no other business here today, I move to adjourn. Thanks, everybody. Have a great Friday and a great weekend.